What is happening, NBA fans? We have finally made it. We are to the precipice of the mountaintop. The NBA Finals are here. We've got two teams left standing. From the West, it's the Golden State Warriors. And from the East, it is the Boston Celtics. Who will win? How will this shake out? Who knows? Who knows? It's tough to tell right now. So to begin today's show, there's a myriad of ways to go, but I'll start with this. It looks as though the betting public and the general consensus among panelists and NBA devotees and experts is that the Warriors are the favored team in this. And on the flip side of that, the predictive analysis, the advanced metrics, and the numbers side of this favor the Celtics. So it comes down to which side do you more agree with? Now, diving into the numbers coming into this, through the playoffs, the Boston Celtics offensive rating is 111.8. Their defensive rating is 105.1, and their net rating, the differential between the two, is 6.7. For the Golden State Warriors, their offensive rating is 116.1. Their defensive rating is 111, and the net rating is 5.1. So Golden State Warriors give up 111. Boston's offense is averaging roughly 111, but their defense has stymied their opponents to 105, whereas Golden State's offense is 116.1. And Boston Celtics defense thus far is no joke. When the offense has slipped for them, it's the defense that has picked up the slack. And they've managed to rely on their defense when they can't get things going on the offensive side. And it's worked very well for them so far. And it's a wise move on their part. The old adage is defense wins championships. And, their defense has got them this far. So it's right to rely on that. The question becomes that 105 in the playoffs is against offenses nowhere near as dynamic as the Golden State Warriors. And will that defense be able to show up in the same way that it has thus far? Or will the Warriors be able to outshoot that defense and play? Because it's not like the Warriors are a slouch on defense either. They're pretty good. During the regular season, they were one of the best defenses in this playoffs. They've been all right, but they've also run up against teams that are a little bit more offensively potent, which is skewing a little bit of their numbers, just like the Celtics have had an excellent defense, but they've also gone up against offenses that aren't going to put up as many points. So that's helping their numbers in that regard. And another thing that is going to be a kind of a breaking point in this series is Golden State is undefeated so far at home, and Boston, it almost seems like, over the past two rounds, they're guaranteed to lose at least two games at home. So one of those two things has to break. Either if Boston wants to win this and go against the predictions of the betting public and experts at large. Boston either needs to win their home games because they're going to be on the road for this. They do not have home court advantage. So they're going to need to take at least one at the Chase Center. And will the Warriors finally surrender a game. I mean, I think it's entirely possible that we go 1-1-1-1 and we're not at 2 games apiece after 4 games. And then it's a best of 3 series at that point. And if I'm Golden State, I'm fearful of that because Boston has now won on the road in 2 straight closeout games. Or two straight closeout series. Games they utterly had to win on the road, and they've managed to do it. When their backs are against the wall and they happen to be on the road, it seems like that is the proper motivation for this team. But if the Celtics want to advance to a championship, they're going to have to win in Chase Center, which nobody else has done thus far. So there's one of the things. The other one was, okay, which is Boston's defense going to be stout enough to hold off Golden State's offense, the number 1 offense in the playoffs so far, and it's the number 2 defense for the Celtics in the playoffs so far. And then on the flip side of that, the Warriors have the number 6 defense and the Celtics have the number 8 offense. So something here has to give. Either the Warriors maintain and they keep their home court advantage and they win this out, or Boston picks one game off. Their defense is this stout and they take the series. Now, each team has its advantages and disadvantages. For Boston, they get to the line more so far through the playoffs than the Warriors. And they also commit fewer fouls that reward the other team with free throws. So Boston, by comparison to Golden State, has won the free throw game. Boston's also been better so far by reducing their opponent's effective field goal percentage through the playoffs. Now, that could be, once again, we're talking about like sample sizes that are pretty small. And you also have to take into account the types of teams they've played so far. So for Boston, it's Brooklyn, who can shoot and shoots well from 3. Milwaukee, hit and miss, but if Middleton's not out there, I'm not sure who I trust from 3-point shooting out there. And then Miami, that's another one. If Strus and a couple other guys aren't hitting their threes, well, Jimmy doesn't really shoot them, although he can't hit them. And Bam doesn't really shoot them. And Kyle Lowry's not a big volume shooter. So it's not exactly as though it's a bevy of 3-point shots that they've gone up against. So that will reduce the opponent effective field goal percentage. Effective field goal percentage is field goals plus 3-point field goals times 1.5, all divided by the number of field goals entirely. So it just weights the 3-point shot accordingly and increases your overall field goal percentage by, if you're going to hit threes, it's worth more overall and should be reflected in your field goal percentage as opposed to just a common weighting with 2. But on the flip side of that, so they have like a 3 percentage point difference? Yeah, 3.2 percentage point difference between them and Golden State. And Golden State has gone up against Denver, then not as much. When that one is not a 3-point shooting team that I'm that scared of. Memphis definitely can be. They can shoot the 3. Dallas lives and dies by the 3. The game, was it 3 for Dallas, was atrocious. And then they came back in game 4 and staved off the sweep by shooting lights out from 3. So that is going to skew Golden State's effective field goal percentage. But Boston is still winning that matchup. Um, Also, Golden State is somewhat designed to give up, more 3-point shooting, and Boston will take advantage of that. They are happy to shoot from 3. So that's a point of emphasis more than likely for the Celtics. And another thing the Celtics do really well is they don't foul near as much as other teams, and they draw more fouls on their opponents, hence the free throw rates. But if they slow the games down by getting into the bonus earlier into quarters, that can skew the outcome of that quarter and that game entirely, especially if they get it with 6 or 7 minutes left in a quarter. Now, every single foul is a trip to the charity stripe. Um, so, on the flip side of that, Golden State's advantages. Now, Boston wins. Here's another one where, okay, we got two heads butting against each other. Boston's the best at limiting the effective field goal percentage of the opposing team. Golden State, they're much higher effective field goal percentage than the Boston Celtics. It's 4 percentage points. It's 57 to 53. That's a huge difference. But they are, Golden State is the number one offense in the playoffs so far. So it stands to reason they're going to have versus the number 8 offense in the playoffs in Boston. They're going to have a higher effective field goal percentage. They also Golden State does they limit second chance points and offensive rebounding, plus points in the paint. They dominate in all three of those categories by comparison to the Boston Celtics. They give up fewer fast break points than the Celtics. And there is going to be another kind of pivot point because both teams turn the ball over too much. They're roughly on par with one another. I think Golden State turns it over a slight bit more, but it's not a drastic difference between the two. So far, though, Golden State has more effectively turned their opponents' turnovers into fast break points and points in general off of turnovers by comparison to the Celtics. And if Golden State can get out and run, to some degree, they have Boston right where they want them by pushing the pace. Um, Although this isn't a situation where if it was Miami that Golden State was going up against, so Miami definitely wants to, they'll get out and run, but their pace and the way they play is more methodical than the Celtics. But still, the Celtics are more methodical than Golden State. Golden State is kind of organized chaos, even in the half court sets, with so much movement and back screens and drag screens and pin downs and everything else. Just the constant fluidity and movement forces a defense to constantly shift over and over and over again. And it creates gaps and seams within the opponent's defense for Golden State to get up a shot that they like. Now, it's not the 100% effective every time, but it can be quite effective, as evidenced by the fact that they're in the finals again for the 6th time in 8 years. Um, so Golden State also absolutely crushes, by comparison, the points in the paint compared to what Boston does so far through the playoffs. So if you look at that, Golden State hits more threes. They get more fast break points. They crush them in points in the paint. The only statistical advantage right now, as far as scoring, that Boston has by the numbers before we get into the actual series itself is free throws. And if Boston's not going to score in the paint, then they're just going to rely on 3-point shots and free throws to get the bulk of their points. It'll be interesting to see how often that is a recipe for success. Because in a lot of other statistical categories, they're a wash. Their turnover percentage between the two teams, roughly the same. Forcing the same number of turnovers, roughly the same. Um, Points off of turnovers, roughly the same. Opponents' points off of turnovers, roughly the same. Opponents' second chance points, roughly the same. Um, Golden State wins and second chance points, and a lot of that is like Looney just cleaning up on the glass. It'll be interesting to see how much Looney plays in this and whether or not the combination of Horford and Williams can stymie the resurgence of Kevon Looney. Um, and, when you start looking at the teams more and more and more, and you get into the weeds of the numbers, both teams are, I mean, they share a tremendous number of similarities. It's they're mirrors of themselves in tons of different statistical categories. And once again, like the difference of some of these things is just a percentage point or two, and because the sample size is so shallow, it can wildly influence your overall rating or placement of the playoff teams. Um, but what even if you dive into the advanced defensive numbers, technically it does favor uh, Boston over Golden State, right? Boston's defensive rating is 105.1 to Golden State's 111. But their defensive rebounding percentages favor the Warriors. Steals per game favor the Warriors. Blocks favor the Celtics. Opponent points off of turnovers favors the Warriors. Opponent's second chance points favors the Warriors. Opponent's points off of fast break favors the Warriors. Opponent's points in the paint, it's a wash. They're the same. So, I mean, looking at all of that, Boston has given up more points off of turnovers, more points in the paint, more second chance points, and more fast break points. I'm sorry, points in the paint is the same. But Boston's defense is rated higher because they've given up fewer points because they're going up against less potent offenses thus far. So it's hard to make heads or tails of how good truly that defensive rating is. But it could be everything. And there's all kinds of small things to watch for here and there. Like here's one that has no analysis whatsoever. It's just looking back at the series as they unfolded. So Boston sweeps the Nets 4-0. And that one is impressive because the Nets were getting buzz of, look, that's a scary 7 seed and they could make it out of the East. It's entirely possible. They've got a lot of talent in that team. They swept them 4-0. Probably should have lost game 1, but still, they swept them 4-0. And then against Milwaukee going into that, they win 4-3, but Milwaukee had a chance to win that series. And that's also without their second best player the entire time. And when Milwaukee struggled, it was when they needed some sort of perimeter shot creator on the wing to basically free up space so Giannis could do the things that Giannis does, because there was numerous times where he's barreling into the lane trying to do Giannis things, and they're dropping 4 back and just creating a wall down there. And that's fine. Giannis kicks out, and he's got a less steady hand shooting that 3. And even knowing that, Boston still had trouble. And it goes to 7 games. But they advance. Against Miami, here's another somewhat flawed team. They have, they've run into more beaten down players. We'll say that. Now, on the flip side of that, Smart and Williams also missed time in this series. But, that game 7, Jimmy had to play literally every minute. Bam played almost every minute, and those are the only 2 people that contributed. Tyler Hero was gone for games on end, and once they had Hero go down, Oladipo just isn't back to full Oladipo, so they have nobody else out there to really play make to free up, the lanes for all their other guys. And it goes to 7 games. There was a moment in that 4th quarter where I thought Miami, was gonna close this out late in the game. I thought they were finally getting the momentum, and we're gonna have Miami in this discussion, but Boston gutted it out. They got the win, but that's 2 back-to-back series where the other team very easily could have won. And it's not like I'm blown away by the juggernaut that is the Boston Celtics. Now the resiliency, yes, I'll give you that. The heart, the determination, 100%. But in someone like, Miami, Boston has more talent, and they should win when you're looking at this. They just have more top-end talent, and the fact that the Heat pushed them to 7 games, A, is a testament to the Heat, but B, makes you kinda question what exactly you're seeing from this Boston Celtics team. And then on the flip side of that, Golden State and Denver, that 4-1. What's interesting about Boston is they have the only sweep, and then they have 2 out of the 3 7-game series, which is this weird, they have the polar opposites of outcomes here. Golden State wins, beats a very flawed Denver team 4-1. Denver got their 1 win, so it's a gentleman's sweep. Unsurprising there. Then they go up against Memphis, 4-2. And I think here's where the difference is, between Boston and Golden State. Golden State figured out what Memphis does well and then game planned for that and took them down. And then they move on to Dallas, and Dallas, who had just beat the best team in basketball over the course of the regular season, the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix had no answer for even times when Luka was out and Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie just went off. Golden State saw all they did, diagnosed it properly, and beat them 4-1. Now, some of that you could chalk it up to Golden State's been there. They know their personnel. They know they do well. They have a system in place. And Memphis and Dallas are growing those things. And they don't have the ingrained culture. And on the flip side of that, Boston is going against former champs in Milwaukee who have a real sense of identity, and they beat them. The Miami Heat, who went to the finals 2 years ago, have a culture and a system in place and took them down. And they're forging their own identity, but it's 2 clashing ideals. Do you buy into this Boston? Because it's an up and down. I mean, are we going to see in the finals, Tatum has a terrible game, and for a, 4th time in the playoffs, he has to sit down with reporters and be like, I played terrible tonight. I have to do better. And then come out the next game and have an excellent game. But I don't think the Boston Celtics can suffer one of those disastrous Tatum games where he just shoots himself out of it and he goes, 5 for 21, and it is not a help. I looking at those, it just, which narrative do you buy into more? I can understand the merits of both. Another little wrinkle to look at is lineups, injuries, and health. Now, for the Warriors, it is a game time decision for Gary Payton, Otto Porter, and Iguodala. But aside from those guys, you've got Steph, Clay, Draymond, Wiggins, Looney, Poole, Kuminga, potentially Bielitsa. Moses Moody started to get playing time in that last round, on top of the guys that may or may not be ready to roll by game time tomorrow. And that's depth and flexibility. So if they suffer an injury, so long as it's not to Curry or Draymond, they'll be able to roll out different iterations of lineups that they've done. They've given their young guys a decent amount of time to kind of get their playoff legs underneath them. And Kerr is more than happy to try different matchups, mix things up. But for the Celtics, if Smart or Williams have persistent injury problems, although they've had a nice amount of rest, and we'll be coming into this, this isn't the every other day. They get some time off to recuperate and come into this. Plus, with all the rest in between games, we got a Thursday game that's 2 days off, and then we have a Sunday game, and then 2 days off, and then we have a Wednesday game, and that's how the final's going to go. So you have more built-in rest as opposed to every other day. But if the Celtics get into another situation like they had in this past round, where Williams and or Smart go down, suddenly you're going to be playing Tice Pritchard and Nesmith much heavier minutes that I think you can get away with in a finals, matchup. If it's going to be Smart going down, you're going to have to play, more of Pritchard and Nesmith. And now for Pritchard, he's just going to get hunted on pick and rolls and on defense. As staunch as Boston's defense is, when he is out there, he is a distinct weak point, and they will hunt that out. And Pritchard will do his damnedest, but he will also more than likely fail on a strong enough clip that Udoka might have to switch it up and put Nesmith in there, who's another young player, and shows he looks so raw when you watch him. He'll have a great play followed by a boneheaded play, and that is difficult to weather in the finals. And if it's Robert Williams that has the lingering knee issues and he has to miss some time, well, now you're playing Tice more minutes, and I think Tice, the Warriors are either going to go small on him and force him to run out to the 3-point line, or just be like, that's fine. You have, Draymond on you, and Draymond is kind of help defender. And that's but you're not extending the defense out to the paint, even though you do shoot threes every once and again. You just don't hit them on a rate that's high enough to warrant Golden State's defense to really worry about this. So injuries are going to play a massive role in this if it happens to the Boston Celtics, just because they don't have the depth to mirror the flexibility and the varying lineups that Golden State can throw out there. I mean, Golden State has got to be the envy of quite a few teams. You look at this young core of guys that they have, mixed with veteran leadership that has won multiple championships together and has been in this system for long enough to where they can teach these guys where to go, what you're going to do on defense. And that's the other thing. So defensively, Golden State is more than willing to switch it up as well, as evidenced by the Mavericks series. They're going 2-3 zone, 3-2 zone, box and one, man-to-man, switching everything, selectively switching, dropping on coverage. They're, instead of switching, they're flashing up and pressing on the ball handler and then scurrying back. Their malleability on defense has been interesting, whereas Boston's game plan has been, we're switching everything. We have a high switchability. We have a ton of athletes who can guard numerous positions on this team. And it kind of makes them bulletproof so long as they are actually, in fact, switchable. And the biggest threat, obviously, is going to be coming from Steph Curry. And Marcus Smart has matched up well with him over the years. The numbers bear it out. Smart pesters Curry into a lower percentage and lower field goals made. Will that be the case again on the highest, at the highest stage? I don't know. We're about to find out. But we do have two really good coaches. So they're going to be making small adjustments here and there. Ime has been really fantastic juggling his rotations and pushing his guys at just the right time, pulling back, getting in their faces about sloppy turnovers or bad sequences on offense and defense and motivating them properly. And then Kerr, on the flip side of that, is so laid back, but it's what his team needs. He senses that, and he also does the push and pull when it needs to happen. Like, there's a great clip from a couple years ago when they're in the finals with KD, and he pulls him aside and he gives him an example of when he was teammates with Jordan and what Jordan would do in this situation and what Phil Jackson imparted to Jordan. And it's in the heat of the finals, and here's a teachable moment. He's just laid back and relaxed and relays the story to Durant. But they're both really good coaches that will be making the small tweaks here and there. I'm curious as to see what happens with Clay, because I think a lot of what the Warriors are going to be able to do is going to hinge upon how well Clay plays. Because it's weird when you dive into like individual numbers. Clay's, statistically, this could be, of the championship runs, this is his best as far as like effective field goal percentage and things like that. But then the team plus minus when he's on versus when he's off is not good. And if you just look at that number, you're like, well, they'd be better just based on these numbers to bring Clay off the bench. But then when you play Clay and Poole together, their defense slips so far. I think that's the biggest, problem with Clay so far, is his defense just isn't the elite level that it was before. And it's kind of be expected. He missed 2.5 years of games, and now he's coming back and rounding himself into shape through the end of the regular season and now into the playoffs. And perhaps the closeout game against the Mavs is the monkey off of Clay's back, and he's going to come into the finals playing like the Clay of old. Because for a while there, I just kept watching games going, maybe they should just play Clay in the second half. Because he seemed to consistently be ice cold in the first half, and then the third quarter starts, and he gets a quick, 2 to 4 buckets. And you're like, all right, there you go. And he ends up in double-digit points, but almost all of those came in the second half, at least to me when I was watching it. I don't know if that's actually the case because I haven't gone back and looked at the box scores quarter by quarter. But that's what it felt like watching these first few rounds of the Warriors, which is like, man, maybe we should just play Clay in the second half. But I think as Clay goes, to some degree, the Warriors go, because if he's out there and he can be any kind of defensive stalwart, he's never going to be back to, at least this year, I don't think there's a chance that he gets back to ballpark of what he was before. But you're going to put Wiggins on Tatum. So if Clay is somewhere close, maybe he can be part of a platoon that goes after Jaylen Brown. It's some function of Clay and Gary Payton, um, or Draymond, and Draymond is just kind of floating between those two, and you're leaving more open the Derek Whites of the world, um, who can't get going, but also it seems like if he misses a couple shots, especially early in the game, he gets skittish and gun shy and won't shoot as often. Um, but I'm curious to see how Clay plays, because I think as he goes, so go some of a lot of the fortunes of the Golden State Warriors. Um, and what happens on the nights where the two Jays are both off? If they have more than one of those, will the Celtics defense be strong enough to make up for that and keep them in these games? I think that's asking a lot of the defense, especially if they've got to do it more than once collectively as a unit. Because now that we're in the finals, if those guys start missing shots, what if it takes them out of the game mentally, as opposed to refocusing them and saying, you know what, my shot may be off tonight, but I can still bring it on defense. I can still make my guy work his ass off to get points. Might not be able to contribute as much on the offensive end, but by God, I'm going to make you work on the defensive end. And will the resurgence of Al Horford continue? Who, a case could be made, he's been the most consistent Celtic over the course of the playoffs so far. I realize, Tatum's going to get all the plaudits, all the flowers. He's going to get the praise. And Marcus Smart got Defensive Player of the Year, and Jaylen Brown has been, to an All-Star game. It looks like if they make a push like this and they win a championship, that he's going to be an All-Star next year, so long as the Celtics don't start off the season just abysmally. But it's the resurgence of Al Horford that has been most intriguing to watch. Here's a dude who was on the scrap heap. Sixers got rid of him after signing him away from Boston because they figured he'd be a good backup to Embiid, and it just didn't really work with the personnel that they had. So they ship him to OKC, and then OKC doesn't play him because, well, they're trying to lose. And that time off may have just been everything the doctor ordered, because during these playoffs, I mean, Al Horford looks like close to Al Horford from Atlanta. But it'll be, really intriguing to see what those matchups look like for Horford, because you assume Looney or Dre is going to be on him, and then it's going to be. I don't know if Golden State is going to roll out that double big lineup that they had, or they're going to put in somebody like Kuminga with Dre, just to give them a bit more athleticism on the wing and potential other individual who can guard Tatum or Brown. But let's jump into the chat. That's enough rambling for me for 40 minutes, and I'll give you guys my choice at the end of this. So Jake Cleveland is asking basically, do I have a favorite game that I went to? That's like an off-season question. It's a great question, but it's an off-season question. I guess my most memorable game, there was a Golden State versus the Clippers here, and it was during Golden State's ascendancy, and Steph Curry did a move on the baseline on CP3 that ended up getting memed, where like CP3 was doing the twister and all that jazz. You can find it. But seeing that live, and I saw almost a full court alley-oop to Blake Griffin once during technically his second year, but he didn't play his first year because he had that knee surgery. So it was almost his rookie year. And it was before anyone in this town gave a shit about the Clippers and got free box tickets. And it was flat out awesome. Anyway, so Daniel Savoy says, I believe Time Lord is an unknown and he's going to cause the Warriors problems. I think if healthy, Time Lord is definitely. He's a person that makes offensive players, when they get down into the paint, think twice about shooting. Um, and Golden State finishes in the paint more often than Boston does. But it's not as though they're Milwaukee with Giannis or Miami with Butler, where they have a guy whose offense is pretty much predicated upon making the defense collapse as they just barrel their way into the lane. But Time Lord will still clog up the paint, especially if that knee is good. Rashawn, our resident Heat fan, is not happy about the 3-point calling on, I'm assuming, Max Strus. Screw these finals. He's saying Golden State's biggest weakness is their height, but they're healthier. Yeah, I mean, Boston's height is a big key. They've got height across all positions in their starting five. Their lack of depth and their potentially lingering injuries to two key guys are the biggest problems right now for Boston. And if they have any kind of inconsistent play from their two big guys, where else are they going to find scoring from? Whereas Golden State has more answers to that question. Riley Pangrass says Finals MVP for the Warriors is going to be Smart if he plays like he did at the end of Game 7 versus the Heat. So by that, are you saying that if the Warriors win, Smart is going to win MVP, which would be the first Finals MVP for a losing team since Jerry West? Or are you just, was that a typo? I'm assuming that was a typo and saying for Boston, it's going to be Smart. Smart would have to absolutely crush to take this Finals MVP from Tatum. And on the flip side of that, for the Warriors, somebody's going to have just the craziest finals for Steph not to win this. I think writers really want to give it to him, and you'd have to hunt for a rationale as to why Steph wouldn't win it if the Warriors win a championship. So Heroes in a Half Court says the White Pool matchup is going to be important, and mark him down for Boston in 7. Riley Pangrass wants Golden State to win, but he thinks Boston in 6. Thomas Stimson says first time catching the show live. He's got Golden State in 6. Riley Pangrass says seems like Clay started to show flashes of being able to defend again in that last series. He defends at an average to good level, and it'll be interesting. Josh H says, I think Marcus Smart will give Steph Curry a tough time if he's healthy. And Professor Rhino says, good day from Australia. It's so damn early here. What time is it there? I can't remember what the time difference is between us. A lot of good choices. And Smart on Curry so far. So over the past 5 years or so, the Celtics have played the Warriors better than any other team in the league. Sorry, I was just reading a comment that came in from Riley. And a lot of that can be chalked up to Smart plays Curry really well. And will we have like the whole Smart hurt Curry and kept him out for a chunk of this season, and this kind of manufactured storyline because I don't think any real bad blood exists between him. It doesn't seem that way. And it only would if you viewed, Smart as a dirty player. And I've never heard of anybody thinking of Smart as a dirty player. Is he a player that flops? Sometimes, yeah. He used to be even worse about it than he is now, but he's also open about that fact. Other guys would be like, no, those were a foul every time. And Smart is more than willing to say, yeah, I've done it. I'm trying to gain an advantage and get a call to go my way. I'm trying to get my team to win. Um, but it should be an interesting matchup. Curry has not shot well against Smart, but if Smart is out there, perhaps they just put him in pick and roll and they try and get uh, anyone else on that defensive matchup. I mean, you don't want the length. So if, say, Derek White is out there, well, perhaps you try and get Derek White into pick and roll switches. If Pritchard is out there, you definitely do that. Neesmith, I would try just because for as much as he's going to get a block, I also think he's going to foul you. But that being said, Derek White is no slouch as a defender. So it's not like it's a massive upgrade. Still better than Smart, one defensive player of the year. People can test it, but he was one of the best defensive players in the league this year. So what to close out? So what do I think? We've got looks like most people are saying in this Boston or they'd like Golden State to win, but they think Boston will. I think it's a tough one. If the Warriors want to win, I really don't want to face Boston in the Chase Center for a game 7 on the road for Boston again. And they've proven that out, that they can win in the biggest moments on the road. They've won 2 game 7s so far. And the Warriors haven't been pushed to a game 7. They've gone to a game 6, but that is it. But looking at all of it, knowing the fact that, as Rashawn brought up, the height and length advantage for the Celtics is something to contend with. I think the health is the biggest thing to me. Because if the Celtics have to go into their bench, I really don't trust their bench. Grant Williams is a great spark plug, and he's annoying as shit if he's not on your team. But he's great when you've got a Durant or you've got a Giannis and you need a body out there to slow down, a wing offensive threat. Which you don't really have as much. Perhaps his overall flexibility and ability to switch onto more players, if a Robert Williams goes down, will still give them the flexibility. But that's my biggest takeaway. When you look at all these numbers, and I kept going through it, and just a positive for Boston, the next stat was a positive for Golden State, or it was a wash for the two of them. And that kept happening consistently over and over. And then you go and look at the offensive or defensive numbers, and then a breakdown of how they get to those metrics. And you look at the numbers that they devise those metrics from. And you're like, this is really even. And I think it's more so a case of Golden State has gone up against better offenses, so their defense doesn't look as good by the number. And Boston's gone up against better defenses, so their offense doesn't look as good by the numbers. But they're very similar. Turnovers, your points in the paint, your fast breaks, your opponent's field goals and effective field goals. And there's a lot of similarities here between the two. So I think it comes down to health. And I think given Golden State's overall flexibility, I favor the Warriors. Now, I want to say Warriors in 7 because it's not like I feel rock solid about this. But if it goes 7, I at this point, it's hard to go against Boston. So I would say if Warriors are going to win this, and I'm going to be accurate, Warriors in 6 is my guess. I would not be shocked if it goes 7, and I would not be shocked if Boston wins in 7. If Boston won in 6, I would be shocked. Shocked might be extreme. Surprised, just because I can see Boston winning this. But as health goes, I think this series goes. So I think Warriors in 6, and that is my guess. We'll see. We'll see what that's like in 2 weeks once we do an autopsy on this series. But there it is. There's our finals preview. And Rashawn Robinson piping in real quick and says Warriors in 5 with no Williams. But it looks like he's saying if Robert Williams gets hurt, Warriors in 5. But we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's game, and then we got Sunday, and then I'll meet back up with you guys in anticipation of Game 3. We'll see where we're at. Will Boston be able to break the Warriors, trend of not losing at home? I don't know. We'll find out very shortly. Or will the Warriors be walking into TD Garden up 2-0? Well, I'll see you guys next Wednesday to determine that. Thank you to everybody that joined in the chat. Rashawn Robinson, Riley Pangrass, Professor Rhino, Josh H., Thomas Stimson, Heroes in a Half Court, Daniel Savoy, and Jake Cleveland. Thank you to everybody. Stay safe out there. You can follow me at Matt Knost. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating review on Apple or Spotify. I'd thoroughly appreciate it. And if you're watching this, subscribe, like, comment, all that jazz. You know the drill. That is it for this week's Dropping Dimes. I'll see you guys next week with another new edition. Until then, adios.